too seriously. When I found myself in the core of the heart, in that timeless, spacelessness that I was just describing to you, can you guys see? Okay. It was, if there was a perceiver of it, it was complete and utter blackness. Total depth of blackness without light, right? So it corresponds to this space here. I was in one of these rings, looking around like, hello, where's the cause of this thing? I'm looking for it, you know? And then I went zoop, right into there. And I watched whatever I was looking for birth out of this space, spacelessness. And then I realized that every other thing, every other issue, because at the time I was working as a healer, right? So people were coming to me with issues that they wanted to fix or solve or whatever. It's changed a little bit now. But every issue I found the causal place or experience of that issue began here. So, and the whole time as a healer, I was looking for the cause. What's the causal level of this issue and that issue and that issue? And I had this fantasy, I thought, that there was only one cause. Wouldn't that be great if there was only one cause of every problem that we could just fix? And I thought, surely that's a fantasy, right? Because it can't be that easy. But actually it ended up as just that. There was only one cause. And that one cause was forgetting that fundamentally this is what I am. So when there's a forgetting, what happens, this is the human field, right? If you want to look at, this is a model of the human energy field, which looks like a mandala, and we'll go into that in a second. So when I have something come up here, let's say this is a trauma that I experienced in childhood, okay? And I have a problem in my ovaries that happens here. And I have some kind of cancer that's over here. What I discovered after working with this was that these spots in our energy field were lacking what was in this spacelessness, because it's not actually a space, right? What was in that space. So what I would do was I would go sit here or wherever I was working with, and then I would pull in this energy into that space so that it would start to bleed in and create a bridge. And then when that bridge was fully bridged, when the experience here was completely merged with this, the nature of this would reveal itself, which means it would unravel. This would unravel, and the true nature or the gift would then become available in the field. So this looks like a conflict or a problem, right? And then when this, which is actually silence, this is silence here, when silence becomes available within the conflict, it transmutes the conflict and turns it into something creative. So this is where you're getting the gift out of the challenge. After some time doing that, let's say, This is all points of healing, right? You can see that the energy field, these rings, this is kind of like an onion. So your energy field is, you could look at it as an onion. You've got mental layers, physical layers, emotional layers, or bodies. Some people call those bodies, right? Your chakras appear in here. When we are in separation, this is what the model looks like. I have a mental layer, I have an emotional layer, I have physical layers. I have all these subtle bodies. I have this chakra, that chakra, that chakra. That's what your body, that's what your energy field looks like when it's in separation. When there's no longer any separation, this completely changes. So what was an onion with several different layers collapses all into the center point, and everything collapses into the center point and arises back out in unification, and it starts to move and become a donut, a moving torus, just like the galaxies that you've seen in pictures. The moving torus is going to be an ecstatic state of being. So if you've seen a torus, you can find them online. They're really cool to find animations of a torus. It's a donut that moves all directions. So it moves up and down and around, and it also moves like this, right? So it's actually moving like that. And there are various colors involved, the frequency of the movement, the intensity of the movement, the layers that are moving in harmony with one another. All of those properties are defining a particular ecstatic state of being, which you can see in a mandala. So if you look at the Buddhist mandalas that they make out of sand, for example, that's a visual representation of an ecstatic state of being that this moves into when the remembering hits all points within the field. So usually what happens is someone starts with an issue, right? They go into remembering what they actually are. They see the true nature of the issue. They rediscover the true nature of themselves. And as that happens, the whole field collapses into an ecstatic state of being. And that ecstatic state of being is also the transmutation of each issue. There were a couple of important things here that I discovered. One is, you're going to experience this for yourself. I'm sure you already have to some extent, you know. So the experience of this is very much what the spiritual traditions that I'm familiar with aim for. You know, this is what, from my understanding, the non-dualists are all about right now. They're basically saying, go into that because duality doesn't exist there. So achieve this. And this has been the masculine path. Go into that Zen, you know, disappear from the world. We're going to be doing that and finding that, let's say. But the important part of that, you can actually become this and look at everything else like, oh, nothingness is observing the field. Nothingness is observing you. Nothingness is moving. Silence speaks. I think there's even a book called, you know. So you can have an experience of being this without a you there and without anybody there, but then still be in the ultimate separation, which is me versus everything else. This is the unmanifest. I'm gone, I'm nobody, I'm Zen. But the ultimate duality is then to the exclusion of the crackers or my dog or baby's dirty diaper, you know. So when I discovered, I began to discover that basically, because if you sit here long enough, which kind of isn't the right terminology, you'll realize there's an arising again back out of the void, back out of the unmanifest. And when that arising happens, there can be separation here. So when there's separation, at a certain arising point, you'll go back into your onion, where all your chakras are separate, you know. All the dantians are experiencing themselves as separate, depending on where your level of separation arises. But when there's an arising with no separation, there's simply another ecstatic state of being that arises. So your energy field can be in one ecstatic state of being, and then there's a shift, and then it moves right into a different ecstatic state of being, depending on lots of things. We're in relationship with other people, with things in our environment, with scenarios. So it's moving from one ecstatic state of being to another. And then something can arise again and go, like wrench in the field. But that's an opportunity to gain charge. So each time we fall out of an ecstatic state of being, or Law of One would say, there's your catalyst. So each time you fall out of a static state of being for whatever reason, then it's an opportunity to gain more variation in your ecstatic state. The importance of that is, as far as I can tell, my experience at the moment, I'll say, is that things are changing all the time. And the process of nature, the way I'm experiencing it right now, which I'm hesitating because I'm in a shift myself, so this could change, is that nature is directing everything. So nature is actually calling us to appear in a certain way based on our unique essence all the time. And nature never stops and is never still, so it's always moving. And if we're stuck here, if we're stuck at a certain place in our field, then our alignment with nature is off. And that's more Taoist philosophy. So you don't have to remember any of this. It's more just to inform the field, so that everything that we're about to do is has a little bit of context to it. Do you have any questions or thoughts?
When you say nature is always moving, what are you defining as nature?
Nature, as far as I can tell, is what arises out of emptiness, not in separation from its source. You could also say it's the unification of manifest and unmanifest. So what happens is, when that Taurus happens, there's, normally, in a situation, something's happening. I'm perceiving what's happening, right? I'm noticing what's happening. And when those three collapse, when the perceiver, the perceiving, and the perceived all become one, and there's no separation or space in between here, that's nature. So some people call that the flow state. So when you're completely absorbed in your task, for example, that would be nature in full expression with no separation between, there's nobody noticing. If I'm so absorbed in writing a paper or making a piece of art, there's nobody there reflecting on it or contemplating, because that one who would normally reflect is so engaged in what's happening that it's gone.
You said the center point, the stillness out of which everything arises, or like residing there, is the masculine path.
Mm-hmm.
And then were you, this other part that you're talking about, were you saying that was, I feel unclear about that, and like if there's another part
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah, there is actually another part, because it's the finding and the realization of what this is that develops masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And what is developing the masculinity is the experience of you. So that's the third element that I haven't added yet. So there's stillness, or the unmanifest, then there's the manifest, and then there's the experiencer of all of that, right? So as the experiencer moves closer and closer into the unmanifest and realizes the origin of itself, it's developing masculinity, that process. And what's called for is going into death, because this feels like death. So as the sense of self dissolves and dissolves and dissolves, it experiences a death with each dissolution, right? And the more, with each death, there's a capacity to penetrate that builds. And I'll tell you why. Because this, when it's discovered, this is a model, right? But this model depends on the perceiver. What's actual is that this is already embedded into everything. So if you know yourself as that, you have the capacity to penetrate every single aspect of existence. So that's how the development of the masculine happens. But then becoming that and realizing, I am this, when you really fully penetrate existence, then you are disappearing into the manifest. And that manifest, disappearing into the manifest, which is actually, when you're coming back out, you're building again a sense of self, but it feels different than the one that can die. So the sense of self that can die disappears completely, but there's another sense of self that needs to arise in order to engage in the manifest world, right? And it has different properties. So the path of coming out again, and then this realizing, oh, I am the seed of the manifest world, is what develops the feminine. Because then there's a disappearing completely into what is moving and changing.
It's like a dying into life, dying forward into life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it completely reverses my usual concept of masculine and feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was listening to David Data for a long time, I felt that flip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mean that he's in the flip that you were just mentioning now, like your perspective feels aligned with his? Or your experience of it? Or the opposite?
If you want to look at it this way, you could say that this is the feminine and this is the masculine. But the exploration of that develops the masculine in the perceiver. So just like when you come in, you know, in Tantra, a strong feminine energy will develop a man, you know, will develop a masculine person, right? And vice versa. A strong masculine will help develop a feminine. If you're talking about two people playing roles within one another, well, that's when you become that, you realize, oh, this is, you can't really say that it's the feminine because it's no thing. It's no thing, but it's developing the masculine because it is experienced as feminine by the masculine.
It's like the contrast of knowing, understanding the other.
Yeah, I mean, the whole key is the perceiver. So we're talking about the one who's having a perception of this. We're talking about identity, right? Because there's somebody got to be navigating the model. There's somebody inside your body right now going, I'm hearing this, and I'm feeling this, and I'm seeing this. That one is going, oh, what about here? Oh no, she's talking about this now, I'm over here. Ah, Zen moment, I'm here, I'm there. Well, what is that element? And that's the third element. And normally, I wait to introduce the identity work, but everyone in this space has already done it, with the exception of Kelly I haven't worked with, and Deanna, but we'll be going there. We'll be going into identity during the weekend, so that will become more clear.